When we give apologies for absence, obviously Phil's gave apologies. I don't know if now's the appropriate time to say that. See. Yes. Anyway, carrying on. Welcome. Welcome everybody to the Town Council Standing Orders Review Committee on Monday the 29th of November. We will be moving on pretty swiftly. If anyone is watching this at home, I'm impressed because I don't think it's the sort of meeting that most people, it's not as engaging as some of our other committees. Moving on, we've got agenda item 2, apologies for absence. We have received apologies for Councillor Phil Leslie. They are the only apologies, aren't they?
Yeah, Sue Morris advised she wouldn't be attended tonight.
Next agenda item, we've got 3 declarations of interest. Do we have any interests? Oh yeah. 4 standing orders review committee meeting held on the 28th of September 2001. These are the minutes for acceptance and approval. Have we read the minute?
I can attend the meeting, so I'm
Okay. Well, I suppose the proposer and seconder.
I'll propose.
I'll second. I don't think there is enough for a vote for acceptance, is it? Did you watch the meeting, Ed?
No.
No. Can we defer them, just to be on the safe side?
Yeah,
for the next
defer them.
meeting. We'll defer them because there's only 2 voting members. I don't think that'd be the quorum. Next, we have the emergency plan. I'm hoping that we have read these prior to the meeting, but also I did think it might be beneficial if we could maybe just work through them a page at a time, if everyone's in agreement. So if there's anything that you want to participate in the discussion, obviously you are more than welcome to. Have you seen the meeting papers?
No, I haven't.
No. Okay. Do we have a spare copy?
Do you have a copy of your emergency plan? If you've got one, please, I would. I haven't got a spare, unless you want to come sit round here.
Okay.
I'm sort of familiar with it. So I wrote it.
Michelle, do you want to talk members through this as you predominantly drafted it?
I can do if you like.
I think it'd be beneficial.
Okay, so may I go like that then?
Sorry, Vera.
You're something to take
I know,
away
sorry, I
again.
didn't realise I was
Good.
talking everyone through it. So, the full council meeting, when I first started, was the 6th of September, and there was a lot of emphasis put on the fact that we don't have an emergency plan. This plan is a draft that I've put together for using a number of different sources that are all already available to us from Brecon, from Norfolk County Council. This can be as in-depth or as simple as we like, so there might be pages in here we don't want, or there might be something missing. One of the things that Councillor Lane, who brought it up in the full council meeting, was specifically felt was quite important, was having some kind of phone cascade. Obviously, that would need to be populated with whoever in the community we see as fit, whether you would want to separate that geographically or by groups. I know Councillor Taylor also has a WhatsApp group that would be helpful. I then put in a list of useful telephone numbers for emergencies, a map of the town. This was something that was suggested on one of the sites, which was local skills and resources. So essentially identifying if there was flooding, for instance, who's got 4x4s, who's got generators, things like that. So this all just needs populating really. There's a brief risk assessment in terms of the kind of things we could have, from power outages to floods to industrial accidents. And then I met with Councillor Taylor and Caroline, and we discussed some of the potential key locations that could be identified with Brecon as places of safety. So that's something again to be populated. And then it finishes really with an agenda, a helpful agenda, should you need to call an emergency meeting, and a list of contacts and volunteers. So the main thing that we need to do is really decide who would own this. It doesn't need to be a member of the council. It could be a member of the community, but it needs an emergency contact and a deputy emergency contact that are happy to lead.
Ed?
First of all, thank you. It's very good, and these are living documents anyway. No changes there. My personal view is it is a town council document, and therefore it should be owned by the town council. I would suggest. And then they start looking at, well, who's responsible as legal proper officer. We can have a discussion about it. But I think it's got to be a town council and bring communities together if we want to. What I'd also suggest, you've probably got this planned anyway, is perhaps informally meet the police, meet the fire service, and just say, listen, this is our attempt to try and do something for the town council and the community, because they'll have access to numerous emergency plans, and also it might help populating that as well. In terms of, okay, if it's this, then it's our responsibility. We'll notify you as the town council, and then just understand the different processes on scenarios. So, fantastic start. I think it, it should be town council, and then try and have some meetings with the police and the fire service. ASAP and walk through that as well.
Well, they are on there as obviously distribution lists and things.
Oh, I'm sure, but
I know you mean to discuss it with them. In terms of us owning it, although I'm quite happy for us to own the document, if you look at all the examples of what else has been done in Brecon, the idea is that your nominated person, for example, I might be the proper officer, but I possibly wouldn't be the right person within the community to be the top of that call cascade. It needs to be somebody with local knowledge, more local knowledge than me in terms of community groups, in terms of people that could help. So although we could own it, we need to find some people that are sort of pillars of the community to kind of help make that happen.
Okay. Again, I'm sure discussions with the other emergency services and perhaps with. Did you say you spoke with Brecon or
Some of this information is from, they've got a guide.
Yeah, but I think it might be useful through yourselves as district councils to talk to Brecon because they're an emergency plan, and also perhaps with the county, just cover all bases. Say, this is a good start of 10, no doubt about it. But what do you think? What's the due process if something happens, rather than us second guessing it and do the phone and then so.
Well, I think from what Michelle said, a lot of this has already been drawn in from information that's publicly available by the district and county.
So essentially, as a town council or a parish council, there is no mandate for us to have an emergency plan. We don't have to have one because Brecon has one. So the idea of us having one is, let's imagine something on a really huge scale happens and Brecon are busy in other priority areas. How are we going to look after our own people and our own electorate? So it's very much a kind of zoned down.
And also tying in more intimate local knowledge.
Yes.
No, absolutely. But I think a discussion now, you've got something on the table to show them and say, okay, practically, how would this work? Have we missed anything out? Or advice?
I mean,
and just go to after that.
if we're looking at a phone tree, if that's the best way of describing it, I think on one side you could have, because there's nothing to say that there has to be one top tier. So we could on one side have Bill and Michelle, or like the chair at the time and the clerk, And then on the other side, you could have the coordinator and deputy coordinator, so that there's multiple telephone calls. That, do you know what I mean, there's at least 3 or 4 telephone numbers. So if for any reason, you know, one of those people is held up, there is an alternative person that you can call. We're not solely relying on the top person.
It also depends on the incident as well. I mean, one particular incident, one person might be best to take the lead. Different incident, somebody else might.
Yeah, but the idea of those conversations with emergency services and other agencies is at some stage that something happens, you'll get the press phoning you up or phoning whoever chairs up and say, so what do you think? And if the emergency services are not contacting the town council, if it's in the protocol or this has happened, just to let you know what the situation is, so it's that communication flow.
Yeah.
So that when you get a phone call from media, you know what's going on rather than I've no idea. So it's a start. It's just understanding, you know, how do comms work? If something happens, who do the emergency services contact and why?
Yeah.
And
No, that
take
makes
it from
sense.
there. So,
Would it be a good idea to zone the town off? So you've actually got people in certain areas that know exactly about that area. You know, because it might happen over here. And people, so you've got somebody that has real local knowledge of that precise area. They know where the vulnerable people are. They know who's got children need to get moved. So
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial. I mean, I did when I met with Michelle, we spoke about this, and we were looking at venues that could be used in an emergency. We were trying to get them spread across the town. So we were thinking, well, where is there? There's the town hall in the town centre, there's the tavern across the road, there's maybe potentially, if we ask nicely, the football club further down that end of town, because that's a nice big venue, or the lighthouse, or, I mean, we did look at the potential areas that we could use so that they were spread out. I think to have people in those areas as well, so it's spread out, would be beneficial, because depending on what the incident is, if there's a road closure or something, and you can't get from one end of the town to the other, you're going to need someone in that area that you can rely on. So I do think that is a good idea.
But I think also back to our discussions with those agencies, if it is a significant incident, the schools will be open. And it's like, okay,
Yes.
who's going to authorise opening the schools? How are you going to get that con? So it's that starting point. There'll be different levels of incidents, or if it's full blown, and the schools need to be open for shelter or whatever. How does that work? So if you get contact and say what's going to happen, so well, actually you need to contact this person, education authority or whatever. So it's just going through that scenario with the key stakeholders.
I did add schools to the list because when we did it before, school was top of the list, you know, because it was able to take a lot of people. And it was sort of almost on the edge.
Everyone knows where they are.
Yeah, and that was when we did the emergency plan before school was top of the list.
Do you have a copy of Franklin's emergency plan?
We're doing a meeting in a week, 10 days time.
Okay,
There's a
is that
meeting training,
I
so
couldn't
I'll,
find the actual plan.
yeah, we've got some training, so.
Thank you.
No, that'll be useful. But no, good.
Thank you. Yeah, the only thing I would say on the draft that we've got at the moment, before it's obviously put forward to full council for acceptance, is I think the places or the people that we've considered as either locations or as, do you know what I mean? I know there's some community groups as well listed. I think just maybe we should try and communicate with them, because obviously we think they would be good in this instance. I think maybe, you know, you have to have their buy-in. We can't so we're not putting a gun to anyone's head. So I think it's just going to them and actually saying that this is something that we as a committee have been looking at. We think you would be good in this position, in this, like if there was an emergency, would you be prepared to help? And I think then when we go to full council, we've already got that buy-in. I think that would, I think that's just polite as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that I would say, if we are going to recommend this for acceptance. And then I think potentially we need to have a think about, you know, who we would put forward as a emergency coordinator or deputy emergency coordinator. and what that role would fully entail, whether it's, do you know what I mean, if it was someone manning a phone, do you know what I mean, and giving direction, that's one thing, but if it's practical assistance, and we'd like to say, you expect someone out.
But that's what I'm saying, we need to be careful of saying, will you do this and give directions, whatever. If it's a road closure or whatever, that's not the kind of case with the police. So it's back to not stepping on toes of something happens, there is a process, and it's going back to Breckland Emergency Services, say, okay, what is the role of town council when something happens, significant happens, what's our responsibility? Do we understand that from a legal point of view or a community point of view? And what's our role? What you don't want to do is duplicating what's going on at one level that they'll have a book for left, right, and centre, and what we're trying to do and think's the right thing. It might cause a bit of confusion.
Well, I don't.
You know, and whoever the volunteers are, they are going to have to be volunteers, you can't ask. I'll say, oh, if all these roads are closed, I suggest you do the rat route around the town, when the highways have go, we've got set diversions in because they're the appropriate routes.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of danger of, the sentiment's correct, don't get me wrong, but we need to really carefully understand how does this work, and it has to be, that will also have to be signed off, I would suggest, by the emergency services and Breckland County Council.
It
So
really
that-
doesn't.
It probably doesn't, but if we're going to do it right, I think, and you know, we're doing our bit and trying to make it as good as it can. And it's back to this, we don't want to cause confusion or miscommunication or sending more messages out when it's already in hand. And it might be town council don't need to do anything, just leave it to us.
There's different levels of it.
And it's different levels.
But then I also think-
It's a massive terrorist incident, when the army will be all over it.
But the key to it, you know, emergency planning is something significant, and the key thing is of whoever's in charge of that emergency or that event, understanding, right, we will contact the town council, this is what's going on, so when you are after any comments or information, you can give that out.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, or they might say, okay, can you help? But they'll tell you, these are things we would like you to assist us with, depending on whatever the level of the issue is. I think it's a bit more full process.
So I don't know if I can see that as something separate, because with this, what I envision this to be is direction. So if there was an emergency, someone would know who to contact locally. If there was a local emergency, someone would know who to contact. If it was something that required the police or emergency services, that's the phone number that you would expect someone to call. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think people have that common sense that, do you know what I mean, if someone's house is on fire, you ring for the fire brigade. If someone's having a heart attack, you ring for an ambulance. If there's someone in your house in the middle of the night, you ring the police. I think this is, again, like with the pandemic, if something was to happen within the town and you needed a network of support, where does that support come from? If there was flooding, do you know what I mean, or something like that, do you know what I mean, where would you get sandbags from? Like, do you know what I mean? Right, and obviously if they contacted us, we could say, well, actually, we've got some, or we can contact the council on that. And I think it is just about pointing people in the right direction for whatever those circumstances may be. So I think it's,
That's a good example for flooding.
yeah.
People going to blind panic, you know, if there's flooding here, there's probably flooding up in other places as well, and resources spread thinly. So you need somebody on the ground here.
I mean,
I
I spoke to
totally
Michelle
agree.
about this. I think we should have our own stock of sandbags.
We discussed this, didn't we?
I really think we should. When you think about the flooding that we've had locally, I mean, Station Road, it wasn't that long ago that there was quite severe flooding on Station Road. It was it last Christmas that there was really severe flooding? It was, where was that? That was Bestthorpe Road.
Silver Street.
Yeah, and I know my dad obviously as a fireman was called out, and obviously that was over the Christmas period, and he was like, people's living rooms, their Christmas trees were floating. It was a disaster. And I just think, I mean, that does happen, and it happens in our town, and there's proof of it. So, and I think in those circumstances, people should know that they can call us and we're available to help.
And then the other thing to consider is what might be considered an emergency here, might not be considered an emergency at Breckland or North Kensington.
No, I
You know,
totally
again,
agree with that.
Flooding's a good example of that.
And I think having those phone numbers on there, that are on the website as well, you know, it, blah, you know, contact these people. But it's back to the different levels of severity, let's say, of incidents.
So can I just clarify that? So I understand what you're saying completely, especially in terms of as town clerk being in the loop from from an information point of view. And I agree with that completely. What I was partly had in mind is the fact that I don't live here and neither does our chair. So depending what the emergency is, yes, we can certainly be phone support, but we might not physically be able to get on the ground very quickly.
Which is fine. It's normally the case.
Yeah.
The prerequisite is you've not got to live in Ashford. That's not how it works. It's about coordination. It's about management. It's mobilising those resources. We can do that remotely, but you've got a central coordinating process that doesn't change. Rather than using swap and change it, that process does not need to change because, for instance, your role will just be comms, coordination, management. Or you need to contact this person, you need to contact that person. Just kept in the loop. It might not be you, might be staff or something.
But I may not be the person that is first aware of it because I don't live here.
But
where
but if something happens, let's say locally, a small thing locally, small post town council, they'll phone the office. And they'll get through to you. What I'm saying, if it's something a bit more significant, worthwhile, the town council need to know what's going on, like balance.
Yeah.
They'll still contact you by phone, but you're just doing that coordination of like, okay, thanks, and then like the next person. So that's that tree. That's how it works. It's a pure comms process.
Would just add in though, if this is something that's going to be during for an emergency, I'm mindful that at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, if someone, again using flooding as an example, if someone's living room's flooding, it's 10 o'clock on Saturday night, do we expect Michelle who's to answer the phone?
But this is worth talking with Angley Water, the police, saying what we don't want to be doing is promoting the town council, saying if you've got any problems with local flooding work, please call us, we'll deal with it. That's not the case. It'll be who should they contact? It's either Anglian Water or it's the police. Starts off with. And we're then just in the loop of understanding what's going on, the severity, what can we do to help? We're not there to take responsibility, and we're not there to promote that. What we're trying to do with this emergency plan is, what is our role? What can we do to help? How do we then coordinate that? How do we then communicate that? And how does that whole process work? And if, you know, you can put stuff, you know, if you've got flooding, please contact Anglian Water or the police on the website. So you're right, no one wants to be phoned up at 10 o'clock. It's not your responsibility. It's absolutely, if it's your responsibility.
But even if it is our responsibility, if Michelle's the lead contact, I think that's a lot for us to ask of Michelle. Like, I don't think that's part of her job description.
Okay, well,
I don't think we
let's say there's something that is town council responsibility. Let's say something happens in the central late at night. Someone will want to contact someone, and it's got to be town council. Now, who that is, we can have a separate discussion or change to job descriptions, what I mean. But this is back to roles and responsibilities. Let's get a clear understanding of that. If it's town council land and what have you, and something happens, and the police say it's town council,
well, this is
then
why
we then need to have that process and that coordination of comms set in place. But you can't rely on volunteers to do that, so it's got nothing to do with volunteers. It's town council responsibility. So it's back to, I think, a bit more thought process in this of identifying it's us, it's them, it's someone else. We need to all coordinate this, check with those other agencies. Does this make sense? Can you understand it? Because they'll want a copy. Because they may say, right, who do I call at the town council to inform them? Or can the town council do something? Who do I call? And that's going to be black and white on paper.
Okay, so just because I am mindful that obviously there is obviously, I think, separate things to this that have now been identified.
Yeah.
Like, I think that that's a like doing us sitting alongside this. So, do you mean in each circumstance who you would call rather than necessarily, I don't know how to word it. So basically, reasons to call the emergency coordinator, reasons to ring the park, reasons, like, do you mean in our phone tree, that's then a whole another list of things. I don't know how we incorporate that to this, but I think maybe.
Well, as I say, this document's a really, really good start. You know, it already has caused a conversation. It's identified other things that if this is going to be our emergency plan, it needs to be comprehensive. This is a start, and then what it has done is, okay, well, what about this? What about that? How do we react to that? Is it our responsibility? We need to talk to other agencies. So
When the cemetery got broken into, the chapel on the cemetery, I just got a telephone call out of the blue to say the chapel was being broken into, so I went over and they rang for the police as well, went over and dealt with it. It was a one-off, you know, I think some of these things, you're not going to have this every sort
Oh,
of
no, of
week.
course not,
So I
of course
don't
not.
think anybody minds being disturbed for a one-off. If it was every week, I think that's a different matter, but that's the only time I've ever been called out to, you know, breaking and council property. No, it wasn't last night. Oh, did it?
by the title, emergency plan, emergency window,
One person's perception of an emergency and another
Is it?
person's completely different things.
which is fine, but it's back to what is the role of the town council? And if it's a minor flooding or my pipes burst, it's like, really sorry, it's got nothing to do with us. That is a separate matter.
This does make it clear that that's not our, we are essentially the bottom tier.
Yeah.
So it is a case of, if there isn't a major emergency, Brecon, they're going to invoke their plan
Yeah.
anyway, they're going to do all their
Yeah.
normal steps. Our first agenda would be things like, right, do we know who is vulnerable in these areas? Do we know who doesn't have power? Do we have any sandbags that we can chuck to that street down there because they're really struggling? It really is very much about the immediate things that we can do in our vicinity. Anything else, I quite agree, is above our remit. It's more about supporting people and identifying people, is how I see it.
No, yeah, which is fine. But all I'm wary of is not put stuff in there that somebody points some responsibility.
Oh, no, I wouldn't, no.
And that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's a bit careful thought needs to
Yeah.
go through this and review and review. Like vulnerable people, social services, NHS, they're got this. Let's say something catastrophic happens, and it's questions like that rather than, you can have local good neighbourhood communities. We've got coronavirus. Helpline as well, so that's one thing.
But even with that, do you know what I mean, with that was a really good learning curve, because actually there is certain people in certain areas that were identified to us as vulnerable. So already there's an understanding through that. You could say, well, actually on Evenside, for example, there's this person and they might need some additional help or support. Or on Dodds Road, there's this person that might need some additional care or support. So I think you already, from having people that you regularly go see, because I mean, some people I was doing their shopping every week, or you'll know it.
Yeah.
And you know they're vulnerable, so you'd be able to check in on them, to go and make sure, have you got everything you need? Do you need anything from the shop? Here's this number, give us a call if you need anything. Like, and then you can, like, not personally take responsibility for that person, but you can use that information to make sure that they're not forgotten or left behind. Which is, that's the benefit of it being like doing it at this level of being local. I feel like there's a better awareness, isn't there?
I get that, but I'm getting a bit confused and calling it an emergency plan. Because the emergency plan to me is an agreed process, protocol, comms, strategy, if something happens in the town. We understand what our role is, what our duties are. And also other agencies know that and they communicate to us straight away, rather than perhaps not calling us and you get a phone call saying, town clerk, please tell us what's going on, or the chair, or whoever. So, you know, it's got to be clear what is this plan, what's it covering, there's whole different levels here. I think we can just we can tick those off. I think going through another process of major scale stuff, it's not us, it's them. So, okay, let's talk to them, how do they communicate with them? Through to more of a voluntary. If there's a cold snap, what do we do? Well, do we put the coronavirus helpline out there? Tell people, say, right, you know, we have some volunteers. So through comms on, you know, through social media and on the webpage, that's a different level, and you've got everything in between. And we need to make sure when we do that plan that all those things in between are at least as clear and as comprehensive as we can be, and not put ourselves in some kind of responsibility where we shouldn't. I'm stepping on toes as well. That's the thing.
Can I put forward a motion? Most incidents, the first people that most people think of to contact is the police.
Yeah.
From then, the police could then contact us or our coordinator to give initial instant help, because we're on the ground and we know the scenario, maybe before Braxton or the county get here. And then as a follow-up, to do what we're saying about the like things like the helpline.
Yeah.
And that sort of local backup that then carries on in the days and months to follow.
But I think going through this
I'm trying to think of
process,
scenarios that will get that, but
but I think it's a fantastic opportunity going through those scenarios of understanding well, what's Brecken's role and responsibility.
maybe we ought to sort of set aside a few examples of
What's the counties, what's social services, what's the police, what's the fire service, and then getting that together and being in communication with them. I think they'll inform our document, so we're a bit clear. Because to be honest, I've got some experience working with central government, but I can't tell you exactly what it is now. All the agencies interrelate, and you know, it's very complex. And I think even getting this on the table now opens that discussion and that conversation with them. So we're clear, right? I'm clear, right? This whole area we can influence. Great, how do we do it? Rather than this is not our area, but these are people who need to contact all the agencies.
I think what might be an idea, if we're in agreement, is that I think we've already said that we think this is a good foundation for what we've got. So would it be worth, before this, obviously, before we take this to full council, like I say, go to the clubs, community groups, whatever, and the venues that are listed within it, and check with them their willingness to participate. Because I think, like I said, do you know what I mean? Well, you have to. You can't sign someone up for something without first asking them. Secondly, try to arrange a meeting with the local representatives from our emergency services. So, you know, Andy London, David Wicks, or Sergeant Shelley, and probably Mark, the watch manager from the station, to have just an informal discussion about the plan that we have.
understand what their requirements would be in that scenario.
In that scenario.
Can I suggest you said that? Because if you go to these local groups, they'll say, what do you want us to do and what? And I think having an understanding from the other agencies.
Well, there's no particular order. It's
Okay,
just
but-
these
but
are
I-
two action points before we.
But I think doing that, and I wouldn't say informal, I'd say we would like a formal meeting with you to vote on emergency plan. Not let's have an informal chat, and can you get the right people there? And the starting point is emergency services. You got contacts there, county council and Brecken's starting to tend, because they'll have a whole raft of cascades down to other areas. And then when you go and see the local groups, you can say, but you're more informed to say, would you like to be involved? Because if something happens, then our understanding, our role is this, and your role could help do this, rather than just saying one side of the because
I mean,
it'll be wide.
Is it worth dreaming up some doomsday scenarios?
The agencies can do that.
Yeah.
They'll have their own emergency
Yeah.
plans and scenarios that say
Yeah,
major incident
Yeah.
to minor.
I'm thinking about heaven forbid a plane falling out of the sky over a Lockerbie incident.
That's different.
No, exactly. I don't think we do a lot of that at all. But then a major accident on the A11, again, we may not get called on to do too much, but, you know, people might, oh, I don't know. Just-
I think the only thing whereby this comes into play significantly for our town council is what we've got now, COVID, the situation, what as a community can get together and do.
Mm.
That's the closest scenario I can see in terms of something major in that plan for the town council as a community. Coordinate from the community to do it. All other scenarios, I think, unless the agencies say different, are outside our control. All they'll do is say, can you put the messages out there?
Yeah, they're outside our control, but what, the police may say, what can you do to help? Yeah, sandbags being a classic example.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah,
That's where the discussion comes in.
Yeah. I mean, it's understanding what they want of us.
Exactly. And at the moment, we've no idea.
I was just going to say in response to Ed, and I think this is where I've done a lot of research with putting this together, so I'm very clear on what our responsibility is. But perhaps we can clarify that, and it is exactly like what you just said with COVID. It is, what can we do to help our local area? I'm very clear what our remit is with this, which is that we don't need to have an emergency plan in the sense of the formality that you're mentioning, because Breckland have that. So our remit is very small, and it's like COVID, or it might be. We've got a huge power outage as another example. Breckland are going to be doing their bit, the emergency services are doing their bit, but what can we do for the people that might need help? And we really are kind of at that bottom tier. And we need to sort of stay there to not stand on anyone's toes, really. It's practical help, isn't it?
No, I think that's fine. And just reading the document, I think it's just a bit of clarity in that. That's all. It's not Kristen and then shake
No,
way
it's good to
but
have
it,
feedback.
you know, it does raise, well, what? And the answers are there. You just need to do a bit more work.
That notion of a service outage being electric, gas, water, whatever, telecoms, it is a classic example. It's going to affect a lot of people all at the same time, and that's where some organisation needs to be taken into account.
I'll take it away, work it.
That's good. That's good.
No, is that okay?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
No, well done, Chance.
Yeah,
Really good.
excellent.
Those contacts are key.
Yeah. No problem.
So just because obviously we are giving Michelle instructions to go away and do this, just to be clear, it is to contact the emergency services, the local emergency services, and ask for a meeting. And to go through the plan, and then the step into being to contact anyone from the community that's been listed within the plan, and to seek their willingness to participate in those events should they ever occur.
And to clarify our role a bit.
And to clarify our role. Can we have that as a proposal, please? I mean, I'm happy to make it, second it, show of hands. Perfect. Thanks, Michelle. Welcome. Brilliant. Okay, so moving on. Next we have, I'm looking at page 2 of my agenda. That's strange. This is what I get for not printing the copy, trying to be good. Communications and media policy. Oh. Don't know what's happening here. That's very strange. Sorry, just hold on a minute.
It's still screaming. It says it's still screaming. It's feeding back. That's us, isn't it? It's feeding up.